How do you define yourself? Is the question I have for you this morning, and I want you to think about, and the takeaway message. How do we define ourselves determines how we act towards others, how they react towards us, and how our lives tend to go. And if those definitions tend towards the negative, then that's what we experience. If they tend towards the more positive, that's what we experience. Greg mentioned I was a 1991 graduate of Texas Lutheran, and I started in the fall of 1987. My sister had also gone to school here. She was 5 years older, and growing up more towards high school into college, she was, the definition we had, she was the smart one. I was the incredibly good-looking one. Well, not so much. I was more musical. I was in the band. I was a drummer, played a little guitar, told a few jokes. So I was more of the kind of clownster musician, which is how I defined myself, and saw my sister as the one that was going to be achieving all the academic success, which she did. And until my senior year of high school, I had a very beloved teacher named Mrs. Richardson here at Seguin High School. And she saw something in me that I was not able to see. I would graduated in the bottom half of my class, but for some reason she thought and felt and somehow pulled out of me something that I was capable of that I didn't see myself as being capable of. And we had our final senior research paper, and she really invested a lot of time and energy into giving me the feeling that this was something I could do, this is something I could do really well on. And so I did put in the work, I put in the time, I gave it some interest, and I put together a pretty good senior research paper. In fact, I got 100 on it, which was pretty unheard of back then. So I thought, wow, this is something I could actually do. So I brought that energy with me into my first semester of Texas Lutheran, where I worked very hard and was able to get a 4.0 my first semester. And then I thought, well, I can do that, so I never did it again. But it was nice knowing, and it expanded my definition of myself into something other than I had limited it to, which I can tell you makes all the difference. Along this line, I have a slide I'm kind of terrified to show, but humility is a good definition. Believe it or not, that was me. I know I look like the guy that ate that guy. 1989. And I have to tell you, my wife is 7 years younger than me, and she doesn't believe this. 1989, the mullet was cool. I was rocking that thing, and I was feeling good about myself and thinking, hey, I'm cool. So anyway, the guy that I pulled this picture because the little kid next to me, his name was Ian. I was a camp counselor up at Luther Crest Bible Camp in Alexandria, Minnesota, and I heard something about camping ministry and getting together at camp, and I can't tell you enough. I could talk for 40 minutes about how great a camp experience is, both on the part of the camper and the counselor, and how many skills and other wonderful things can come out of that. So I encourage you, if you haven't had the opportunity to do some camp work, I definitely would say go for it if you get the chance. I'd do it all over again if I could. Anyhow, that was my first summer at that particular camp, 1989. A kid next to me, I remember his name was Ian. I remember it kind of got burned into my brain because he was about the worst camper you can imagine. He was, although we had a little pre-warning about him that he may be a behavioral problem, as far as I can recall, he was in the foster care system. I didn't know all the details. They didn't share it with us, but he had had a very unpleasant experience with his own family, parents, or lack thereof. Was moved from foster care to foster care. He was finally with a foster family who wanted him to have this camp experience, thought it could be helpful to him. And he was berserk all week. I mean, he was one of the kids that I had to take away everybody's canteen time every day. And if you ever worked in camp, well, I guess if you work at Chrysalis, maybe it's still the Cocoon, but the canteen is like everything, where you get to have some Snickers bars and a soda. And so losing that is like losing, Monday Night Football or something to some people. But so he was always creating a ruckus, kept us up late every night, was always fighting with the kids, stirring up things. The little Bible studies I would do, he would always interrupt and make jokes, and it was just really hard to get through to him. And we had this mantra in the summers that started for me that summer that was really helpful, especially as the summer got into its final month, that some of the most unlovable kids are the kids that need our love the most. And that's something I really had to practice with Ian. And also realizing that love isn't just an adjective describing how you feel. It's not just a noun describing something you have, because I didn't have that feeling for Ian during most of the week, and I didn't have it for him, but I chose to love him, as did the rest of the staff, because the rest of the staff had to get involved, including, I remember, a pretty dramatic final night campfire, which those of you that have worked at Bible camps know that's kind of a real big spiritual experience, emotional, and this week is ending and we're going back into the real world, and it's just as it was at this camp. And Ian ran away that night from the campfire, and we had to go track him down, several of us, and pulled him back in, and he wasn't able to express, at 9 years old, what was going on with him or what he was feeling or what it was, but he just didn't feel like he was a part of what we had going on there. He just didn't feel that he deserved it. He definitely saw himself as unlovable. And so that night we loved him. And we tried to pull out of him all the virtues and characteristics and the strength he had and the heroism he showed, making it through the system he had made it through, and doing something that none of us had experienced, and coming out on the other side and being able to be, albeit not in the best way, still relatively funny, good-humored, was able to, pretty intelligent kid. I mean, intelligent enough to kind of get under our skin sometimes and do some manipulative things. But we just showed him love, and lots of it. And so the next morning he went, and I probably got that real big smile on my face because I was a little glad to get rid of him, but still he experienced love. So fast forward several years, I'm going to seminary up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm actually running a camp in northern Minnesota. And thanks for taking the picture off, because that's about all anybody can handle. And I'm driving Bronco 2 with our camp trailer attached to it, coming back into St. Paul, and I break down. And trying to, still before cell phones, I'm trying to flag people down for somebody to come help me. And this kid pulls up in a truck and gets out, and he's got a little mustache, kind of like the 17-year-old version. And I don't recognize him at all, but unfortunately to say, I still had a little bit of the long and back party in back and business in front. So he said, Tex, and as I was called back then, Tex, coming from Texas. And I didn't recognize him, and he said I was Ian, and as he was helping me, because he knew what to do with my car, which I have no knowledge of automotive repair, and kind of fixed it up and helped me. And of course, being the kind of person that would pull over and help somebody that they don't know on the side of the road is always pretty impressive. And he made reference to that experience at camp as being, life-changing for him, that he realized not just the experience of running away and what we had done that night, but he realized he didn't have to be limited to what he thought he was limited to in his life, that it went beyond that, and he kind of fought against that. But that week really changed his life, much for the better, and he was on his way doing pretty well at school, applying to colleges, and it changed his life. And it redefined him, and his definition, I hope to this day, continues to be redefined towards the better. In the psychological, particularly the psychotherapy community, we have ways of defining people. And unfortunately, they tend to be negative. There's a book called The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders that started around roughly 1952 as a little pamphlet of various things like melancholy, otherwise known as depression, hysteria, some other weird things, but it was a little pamphlet. Now today, and I have an older version of it, it's on its 4th version, it's about to go on its 5th version, and that's how many things you can have wrong with you. And we can help you with those things if we know what's wrong with you, and we can do something about it. I've, in recent years, come to reject that. Unfortunately, I still have to use it if I'm processing insurance and whatever. but have found through new fields of what's called positive psychology and type of therapy I'm more apt to do, which is called solution-focused psychotherapy, that focusing on the problems doesn't really help people. In fact, focusing on, if no matter what situation you have, it's the couple that fights all the time. If I have their week between my hands, maybe they fight literally while they're sleeping, part of that time, so they're not usually fighting when they're sleeping, unless they're me and my wife, and I'm always jabbing her. Maybe the problem's really a problem 80% of the time. 20% of the time, things are reasonable or okay. So instead of focusing on trying to diminish the 80%, we focus on the 20% and try to build on it and try to redefine what they're capable of doing and what they've done in the past and how they are in other relationships. And same with depression, same with anxiety, same with childhood behavior problems. Not focusing on the problem or everything that's going wrong, but focusing on when things go right or when things are just slightly better. My wife, who works in a psychiatric hospital, even the most depressed of the depressed cycle. They're usually in a low mood, but there are times they feel just a little better. And that's what we hone in on when they're feeling a little better, and what strengths they do have or what strengths they've had that they've forgotten or what potential they have. And we focus on that and expand that. I'm no statistician, but if I take 100% between my two hands, there's 80% bad here, 20% here. We make the 20% grow and focus on that. The 80% naturally has to diminish. And people always ask me, how can you go through a day listening to people's problems and all this horrible stuff all day? Well, I don't. I mean, the problems make themselves known, yeah, and we pay some attention to that, but much more attention is paid to what we know. And I think this is the scripture I picked for today, Apostle Paul, who, perfect example of somebody who redefined himself from Saul, literally, to Paul, redefined who he was from somebody who persecuted Christians as a Roman citizen to somebody who became a martyr for the faith, depending on what Christian history you to believe, probably ended up beheaded. And he was writing this letter to the Philippians, who were freaking out because they started a new church and things weren't going very well, and there was infighting and a lot of political stuff, which maybe you can kind of recognize maybe some of that going on right now. But he was cool as a cucumber. And he was once again in prison. He was under house arrest this time, but he spent a lot of his ministry in prison. And he was telling them, relax. Don't focus on that stuff. Focus on the potential. Focus on the good things. Focus on what God has provided and the potential that God has given you. It says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things, and the God of peace will be with you. Focus on the solution. Focus on the positive. Focus on works better. And that doesn't mean the other stuff automatically goes away, but it becomes less cumbersome, and we become more empowered to help and heal with it. And I'm cutting off right now because Greg's standing up, but I encourage you, and you can talk to me about this afterward, but the University of Pennsylvania, which is kind of where the field of positive psychology started, you can log on to the upenn.edu website, and they have a strengths finder, and they're focusing more and more on virtues like creativity, perspective, social intelligence, humility, gratitude, humor, vitality, kindness, prudence, appreciation. I have a whole list of things, but you can go on there, look at your strengths, look on what you're doing well, what you can expand upon to kind of allow you to live out the potential God has for you, and I would encourage you very strongly to do that. And I'm going to close in a prayer that's personal to me, but I'd like you to imagine beyond this prayer your own situation and what you have that maybe gets lost in the focus on the negative and the stuff that your body and mind keeps you vigilant about, but taking time to be grateful for what you do have and the potential that we all carry.